Hello, how are you? I'm fine, thank you. Sit down, please. I'd like to speak English today too, to improve my speaking skill. Let's get it started. Today, it is August 17th, 2022. It's on Wednesday. It's a little cloudy outside. Are you tired in this society? Are you tired in this society? Do you belong to the society? Do you belong to the medical society? Do you belong to the association? Do you belong to the federation? My family doctor is to attend the medical society, so the clinic will be closed tomorrow. My doctor is to announce his research at the medical society tomorrow, so the clinic will be closed tomorrow. The doctor is to announce his research at the medical society tomorrow. I was very bad at studying social studies when I was a student. Social studies bothered me a lot because I didn't know how to study social studies. Social studies was very difficult for me to study. It was so difficult for me to study social studies. There were many things to memorize, and there were many words I couldn't understand. I couldn't make heads or tails of. Did you like social studies? Did you like social studies? Did you like social studies? Which subjects did you like? Which subjects were your favorites? Which subjects were your favorites? Which subjects were your favorite? Which subjects were your favorites? Which subjects were your favorites? Which subjects were your favorites? The doctor is to announce his research at the medical society. A new research will be announced at the medical society today. A new research of the disease will be announced and discussed at the medical society. Do you think this fashion is out of place at the social place? There are many social problems out there. There are many social problems out there to be solved. There are many social problems to be solved there. Do you think this cloth is out of place at the social place? I don't like to be in a social place. I don't like being in a social place. I don't like to be in a social place. I don't like being in social places. I don't like being in social places. I don't like being in social places. Do you think this clothes is out of place for the at the social place? There are many social networking services now. Social networking service. SNS stands for social networking service. Do you also use a social networking service? I'm sure you will use more than 2 or 3 social networking services. Nowadays, we can easily get in contact with many people from all over the world through SNS, social networking service. But we have to be careful. There are many social problems to be solved. There are many social problems to be solved there. Do you think this cloth is out of place at the social place? Do you think this fashion is out of place at the social place? I don't like to be in social places. I don't like to be in a social place. I don't like to be in a social place. I don't like being in a social place. I don't like being. I don't like being in a social place. I don't like being. I don't like being in I don't like being in a social place. Social. Social. Is your husband sociable or not? Introvert? Extrovert? Is he sociable? Sociable people will benefit a lot in this society. Sociable people will benefit a lot in this society. Sociable. Sociable. Are you sociable? 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 Is he sociable? Is she sociable? Sociable people will benefit a lot in this society. I'm not as sociable as you. I'd like to be as sociable as you. I'd like to be as sociable as you. Some people are very sociable while others are not. Some people are very sociable while others are not. The celebrity was spotted socializing with an ordinary man. The celebrity was spotted socializing with the CEO. The celebrity was captured, spotted, identified, socializing with a CEO of the company. We were educated to be polite to others. We were educated to be polite to elderly people. We were socialized at the school in preparation for going out to the society. The raccoon was socialized before releasing him to the forest. The domestically grown raccoon was socialized before releasing him to the forest. The domestically raised raccoon was socialized gradually before releasing him into the forest. The domestically brought up raccoon was socialized gradually by the owner before releasing him to the forest. The raccoon was socialized before releasing him into the forest. The political party wants to socialize a country. The political party wants to socialize a country. Prefecture. The political party wants to socialize the country. The political party wants to socialize the company. I socialized with my clients at the cafe today. I socialized with my clients at the cafe today. Do you like to socialize with others? Do you like socializing with others? Do you like socializing with strangers? Do you like to socialize with strangers? Do you like socializing? Do you like socializing? Do you like to socialize? Do you like to socialize? Do you like socializing with others? Do you like to socialize with someone who you met for the first time? Do you like to socialize with someone whom you will meet for the first time? Do you like to socialize with someone who you meet for the first time? You have met for the first time. I saw my friend socializing with a guy. I saw the lady socializing with a man. I saw the celebrity socializing with her husband. The celebrity was spotted socializing with someone. The celebrity was spotted socializing with someone. The celebrity was spotted socializing with someone. I have to socialize with my client today. You can have an opportunity to socialize with people who you don't know at some places or events. Now we can have the opportunity to socialize with people, new people, in some events or places. Now you can socialize with many people from all over the world through social networking service. Nowadays, we can easily socialize with people across the world through social networking service. There are some events in which you can socialize with people. There are some events held in order to socialize with business people. There are some events in order to have the opportunity to socialize with business people. There are some events to socialize with businessmen, business partner, businessmen. There are some events or places where you can socialize with people. Socialize. You can socialize with people. The raccoon, domestically grown raccoon, was socialized gradually before releasing him into the forest. The domestically grown polar bear was socialized gradually before releasing him into the zoo. The domestically raised raccoon was socialized gradually before releasing him into the forest. The celebrity was spotted socializing with someone. Nowadays, there are many events or facilities where you can socialize with new people. Do you like to socialize with new people? Do you like socializing with new people? When did I mention that? I haven't mentioned that. I didn't mention that. When did I mention that? The president of the company avoid referring to the mention. He mentioned that he would like to achieve his goals at any cost. He mentioned that he would like to achieve his goal at any cost. There are some mentions we should avoid. There are some mentions that we should avoid. Please avoid mentioning this mention. Please avoid referring to this mention. There are some mentions that you shouldn't talk about. There are some mentions that you shouldn't talk about. There are some mentions that you shouldn't talk about. There are some mentions that you shouldn't talk about. There are some mentions that you shouldn't talk about. There are some mentions that you shouldn't talk about. There are some mentions that you shouldn't talk about. There are some mentions we shouldn't talk about. There are some mentions that we shouldn't talk about. In terms of his mentions, I cannot answer right now. Please give me the room for thinking. Regarding the mentions from him, I cannot answer right now. With respect to the mentions from him, I cannot answer right now. With regard to the mentions from him, I cannot answer right now. In regard to the mentions from him, I cannot answer right now. In respect to the mentions from him, I cannot answer right now. The remark by him made the citizens angry. His remarks made me angry. His mention was out of place. His mention regarding his hobby was out of place in the meeting. His mention regarding his hobby was out of place in the meeting. His mention regarding his hobby was out of place at the meeting. His mention regarding his hobby was out of place at the meeting. His mention regarding his hobby was out of place at the meeting. His mention about his hobby was out of place. His mention about his hobby was out of place. His hobby. His mention about his hobby was out of place at the meeting. There are many mentions we should avoid at the meeting. He was told to avoid the mention by his lawyer. The client was told to avoid the mentions by his lawyer. The client was told to avoid the mentions by his lawyer. The client was told to avoid the mention by his lawyer. The client was told to avoid the mentions by his lawyer. The client was told to avoid the mentions by his lawyer. The client was told to avoid the mentions by his lawyer. The client was told to avoid the mentions by his lawyer. I don't like alcoholic beverages, let alone beer or wine. I don't like going outside in summer, let alone climbing the Mount Fuji. I don't like to go outside in summer, let alone going to beach. I don't like to go outside in summer, let alone climb the Mount Fuji. I cannot speak Spanish, let alone write it. I don't like alcoholic beverages, let alone beer. Much less beer, let alone beer. I don't like crowded places, let alone Yamanote line. I don't like crowded places, let alone Yamanote line. Much less Yamanote line. I don't like crowded, packed places. Much less Yamanote line, Yamanote train line in Tokyo. I don't like crowded places, let alone Yamanote line, much less Yamanote line. I don't like crowded places, let alone Yamanote line, much less Yamanote line. I don't like crowded places, much less let alone Yamanote line. I don't like natural disasters, let alone typhoon or earthquake. I don't like natural disasters, let alone earthquake. The issues will be discussed at the meeting. The issues will be discussed at the meeting. Let's discuss the problem tomorrow. Let's discuss the problem tomorrow. Let's discuss it tomorrow. Let's discuss where we should stay tomorrow. Let's discuss where we should stay. The problems are under discussion. 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 The problems are now under discussion. I'm sorry, I don't have much time to read the book at length. Read the documents at length. I recommend you shouldn't ask him because once you ask him, he will explain that in detail until the sun goes down. He will start to explain everything at length until the sun goes down. So I recommend you not ask him about anything. I recommend that you not ask him about anything. I recommend that you not ask him about anything because once you ask him, he will start to explain everything at length until the sun goes down. So unless you want to waste your precious time, you shouldn't ask him a question. At length, 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 at length. At length, 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 at length. At length, at length, at length. I haven't watched the movie at length. The problem should be discussed at length at the diet session. The issue should be discussed at length. The issue should be discussed at length. Whether or not the sports meeting would be held was discussed at length at the meeting. Whether or not the sports meeting would be held should be discussed at length. Whether or not the sports meeting is held should be discussed at length. At length, at length, at length, at length. If I have time, I will read the documents at length. If I have enough time, I will look it over at length. I will go it over at length. At length. Do you have a spouse? Do you have a spouse or family to provide for? Do you have a spouse or a family to provide for? Do you have a spouse? 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 Do you want to have a spouse? Would you like to have a spouse? Would you like to have a spouse and create a family? This room is 2 or 3 times broader than mine. This room is 2 or 3 times as broad as mine. I wish I could have this kind of room. I wish I could have such a broad room. If I had this kind of broad room, I would be more satisfied. If I had this spacious broad room, I would be happier. I wish I could have this broad room. I wish I could have as broad room as yours. I wish I could have broad room as yours. I wish I could have as broad room as yours. I wish I could have as broad rooms as yours. I wish I could have as broad rooms as yours. I always park my car in a broad parking lot. I always park my car in a broad space. I always park my car in a broad space. The broad speculation from the commentator is that the typhoon will be created within 24 hours. According to the broad speculation from the specialist, the typhoon will be created within 24 hours. The broad calculation. According to my broad calculation, the sales figures will be 1 billion yen. According to my broad calculation, the sales figures this year will be lower than last year. According to my rough and broad calculation, the sales figures will be a little bit lower than that of last year. The correspondent in the site informed us of broad situation in the site, in the country, in the province, in the city, in the prefecture, in the county. The, the correspondent in the site informed us of broad situation. The correspondent informed us of the broad situation in the county. Broad number of the visitors into the facility will be more than 500. The broad number of visitors into the facility will be more than 500. The broad number of visitors into the facility will be more than 500. The broad number of the visitors into the facility will be more than 700. My broad speculation, prediction of future is that more and more Japanese people will be understand English. My broad prediction is that I will not be able to pass the examination this year, but it is not 100% sure. But I just would like to try because I don't wanna regret that. I wanna try. I will do to the best ability, to the best my ability, to my best ability. To the best of my ability. To the best of my ability. To the full extent of my ability. To the full extent of my ability. I will do to the full extent of my ability. To the full extent of my ability. To the full extent of my ability. To the best of my knowledge. The shopping mall will be created in the vacant land in 2 years. I will do to the best of my ability, to the best of my ability, to the full extent of my ability, to the full extent of my ability. The broad speculation will be done with the statistics and the information got from the internet. Broad speculation and prediction will be made from a lot of information. Broad speculation will be made. Broad prediction will be made through a lot of information out there. Today I could use the field broadly because there were no other customers in the field. We could set up our tents broadly because there were no other guests in the field, in the glamping area. This time we could set up our tents and could use the space broadly because there were no other guests in the camping site. Since there were no other guests in the camping site, we could set up our tents and use the facilities and other things broadly. And since there were no other guests in the camping site, we could use the site broadly. We could use the site broadly. And since there were no other guests in the camping site, we could use the space broadly. Since there were no other guests at the camping site, we could use the site broadly, 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 broadly. Broadly speaking, the festival will be held since 3 years. And since there were no other guests in the camping site, we could use the space broadly. And since there were no other guests in the camping site, so we could use the space broadly. Broadly speaking, our bonuses will be higher than last year, given the cheaper Japanese yen. Because more products will be bought by foreign companies or customers. The products are assembled broadly at the previous process before sending them to the next production line. The products are assembled roughly, broadly, before passing them to the next assembly line. The products are assembled broadly at the previous process. The products are produced broadly at the previous process before sending them to the next assembly line. There were about 5 million guests broadly. There were 500 guests in the meeting room broadly. Broadly, 1 million visitors visit the tourist spot every year. More than 1 million visitors go to the festival every year, broadly. Broadly, 1 million people visit the facility every year. Broadly, 1 million visitors visit the facility every year. Broadly, 1 million people visit the facility every year. Visit. Broadly, 1 million people visit the facility every year. Broadly, 1 million people go to the festival every year. And since there were no other guests in the camping site, we could use the space broadly. Where did you get the information? I usually get information from my reliable friends. Information industry. IT stands for information technology. I will inform you of the updates as soon as I get the updates. I will inform you of the situation and updates as soon as I get the updates. I will keep you updated. In the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. After being informed of the truth, I could not stand. I could hardly talk. I could scarcely talk because of the sadness. After informed of the truth, I could hardly talk. I could scarcely talk. It was not until yesterday that I was informed of the truth. It won't be until tomorrow that the result is announced, is informed tomorrow. It won't be until tomorrow that the result will be informed. It won't be until tomorrow that the result is announced, is informed. It won't be until tomorrow that the results are informed. It won't be until tomorrow that the results are informed. It won't be until tomorrow that the result is informed. It won't be until tomorrow that the result is informed. It won't be until next week that the result is informed. It won't be until next year, next April, that the new policy will comes into effect, will become effective. It won't be until next April that the new policy comes into effect, becomes effective. It won't be until next April that the new policies come into effect, become effective. I cannot inform you of the truth here. It's very private. I'd like to get informative information. Where do you usually get such informative information? Where do you usually get such informative information? Informative. Thank you, it was very informative. I was solved. Thank you, the information was so informative for me. Thank you, what you said was so informative for me. Thank you, the lecture was very informative for me. Thank you very much. The lecture was very informative for me. Thank you very much. The lecture was very informative. Informative. Constructive. The meetings will accept only constructive proposals. Otherwise, all of them will be rejected, turned down, declined, put down. Informative. No other information is informative as those from you. No other information will be as informative as those from you. No information will be as informative as those from you. No other information will be as informative as that from you. No other information is as informative as that from you. No other information will be as informative as those from you. Thank you. Informative. I got such informative information. Informative. 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 Is the information informative? The lecture was very informative for me. The lecture was very informative for me. The tour of the factory was very informative to me. I could learn a lot of things. The tour of the factory tour was very informative for me. I could learn a lot of things. Who managed the company? Who is the company managed by? 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 The company is managed by the son of the president, the chairperson. The company is managed by the son of the chairperson. Management of a company is not an easy task. Management of the factory or company is not an easy task. I'd like to talk with the manager, general manager. I'd like to talk with the manager of the production line. So could you tell me the extension number to the production line? I'd like to talk with the manager of the production line. Could you tell me the extension number? Or could you transfer my line to the production line? Could you transfer my phone to the production line? Could you transfer me to the production line? Who manages the company? Who manages the company? Who manages the shop? Who manages the factory? Who manages the factory? Who manages the company? I'd like to know who manages the company now. I'd like to know who manages the shop right now. Who is the company managed by? Who is the shop managed by? Who is the company managed by? Who is the shop 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 managed by? The shop is managed by me. The shop is managed by you. Do you manage the shop? Do you manage the shop? Do you manage a shop? Do you have the experience of managing a company or a shop or a group? Do you have the experience of managing a company, group, or a shop? Have you ever engaged in managing a company, shops, or a group? Have you ever engaged in managing a company, shop, or a group? Have you ever been involved in managing a company, groups, or a shop? Have you ever been involved in managing a company, shop, or a group? Yes, I have been involved in managing a company, shop, and a group. No, I haven't. I haven't been involved in managing a company. Have you ever engaged in managing a company? Yes, I have engaged in managing a company, managing a group, managing a shop. Yes, I have engaged in managing a company, I have engaged in managing a shop. I have engaged in managing a company. I have engaged in managing a shop. I haven't engaged in managing a shop. I haven't engaged in managing a shop. I haven't engaged in managing a shop. Managing a shop. I haven't engaged in managing a shop. I haven't engaged in managing a shop. Managing a shop. I haven't engaged in managing a shop. I haven't engaged in managing a shop. Could you really manage it? Manage that. How can you manage that? How can you manage that? I could manage my life with the pension, with the salary. Can you manage that? Can you manage your life with the pension? Can you manage that with the salary? Can you manage that on your own? Can you manage that on your own? Can you manage that on your own? Yeah, I will try. I will manage that somehow. I will manage that somehow. I will manage that somehow. I will manage that on my own. I will manage that on my own. I used to manage everything on my own. I used to manage everything on my own. I used to manage everything by myself, but now I sometimes rely on someone. I rely on someone. I turn to someone. I count on someone. I could manage to overcome the difficulties. I could manage to overcome the difficulty. I managed to overcome the difficulty. I could manage to overcome the difficulties. I could manage to get through the difficulties. We could manage to overcome the difficulty. I could manage to overcome the difficulties. I could manage to get home. I could manage to arrive at home. I could manage to arrive at the airport on time. I could manage to arrive at the airport in time. I could manage to arrive at the cinema in time before the beginning of the movie. I could manage to arrive at the cinema in time. I could manage to arrive at the airport in time. I could manage to arrive at the airport in time. I could manage to arrive at the airport in time. I could manage to arrive at the airport in time. Can you manage to overcome the difficulties? Can you manage to deal with the tasks on your own? Can you manage to deal with the tasks on your own? If not, you can ask me all the time. I could not manage to deal with the problems on my own, so I asked my buddies, and they pitched in. I managed to get to the airport in time. I managed to arrive at the airport in time. I managed to arrive at the airport in time. I could manage to arrive at the airport in time. I managed to arrive at the airport in time. I managed to arrive at the airport in time. I managed to arrive at the airport in time. I managed to arrive at the airport in time. I could manage to pass the examination. I could manage to pass the examination. I could manage. I will manage. Because this is the direction I chose. I will manage because this is the life I chose. I chose. I will manage because this is the choice I picked out. I will manage because this is the decision I made. I will manage because this is the decision I made. I will manage because this is the decision I have made. I will manage because this is the decision I have made. I will manage because this is the decision I have made. Management of a company is not an easy task. Management of a shop or group is not an easy task. Management of a group is not an easy task because there are some people who cannot get along with each other. Management of the production is not an easy task. My duty is the management of the production line. I used to work as a manager to oversee employees working in the factory. I used to work as the manager of the department to oversee employees working in the production line. Are you interested in the management of a company or shop or a group? Are you interested in management? Are you interested in management job, management position? Are you interested in a management position? Are you interested in a management position? Management. Are you interested in management? Management of the machines are not an easy task. Have you ever engaged in the management of a group or a company or a shop? Have you ever engaged in the management of a group or a company or a shop? Have you ever been involved in the management of a department of a company? Have you ever been involved in the management of a company, shop, or a group? Do you want to be promoted to the general manager? Do you want to be promoted to the general manager? Do you want to be promoted to the general manager? Manager. Do you want to be promoted to the general manager? Manager. Do you want to be promoted to the general manager? Do you want to be promoted to the general manager? Manager. The manager oversees the production line. The manager of the factory surveys the production line. I came across the manager of the department and we went to the cafe together. I ran into the manager of the apartment and when we went to the cafe together. I used to work as the manager of the shop. I used to work as a manager of the shop. I asked my manager of the shop to give me 2 days off, a week holidays. I asked my manager of the shop to give me a week holidays, but it was rejected because a week holidays are too long. Do you want to be promoted to manager someday? Do you want to be promoted to manager? Do you want to be promoted to manager? Do you want to be promoted to manager? One of my friends recently was promoted to manager. The employee was promoted to manager. He made his way up manager. He made his way to manager. He made his way to manager. He made his way to manager. Suddenly. Gradually. He made his way to manager. Gradually. He took advantage of his experience as a manager of the department when he searched for another job. He took advantage of his experience of the manager when he looked for another job. He took advantage of his experience as a manager of the factory when he looked for another job. I'd like to talk with the general manager of the production line. Could you tell me the extension number or could you transfer me to the department? I'd like to talk with the general manager of the production line. Could you transfer me to the department or could you tell me the extension number? Manager. I ran into a manager of my apartments and we said hello. We greeted each other and passed away. Passed. Please do not let me down. There are some factors letting me down. Letting me down. There are some reasons letting me down. letting me down, letting me down, letting me down, letting me down, letting me down. Please do not let me down. Please do not let others down. Please do not let others down. Please do not let down others. The bad score on the test. Let me down. Let down. Let me down. The bad score of the test let down my parents. The lose to the opponent. The teams lose to the opponent let down the fans. The teams lose to the opponent, let down the team, let down the fans. The teams lose to the opponent, let the fans down. Let the fans down. The bad score on the test let down my parents. Okay, I will look it over in Shinkansen. I will look it over in Shinkansen. I will look over the documents in Shinkansen because I have 2 hours and 2 hours and a half to Osaka from Tokyo. So I will look the documents over in Shinkansen in Nozomi. I'd like to look the documents over in Shinkansen. I'd like to look the documents over at Shinkansen. I'd like to look over the documents in Shinkansen. Could you look over my essay before I turn it in? Before I hand it in? Could you look my documents? Could you look over my essay? Could you look over my essay? Could you look my essay over? Could you look my essay over before I turn it in? Before I hand it in? Okay. I looked over the article. Were you this kind of person who looked the text over before the class started? Were you this kind of person who looked the text over before the class started? Were you this kind of person who looked over the textbook before the class started? I used to look up the meaning of the words in dictionary, but now I use internet. I used to look the meaning of the words up in dictionary, but now I use internet. I used to look up the meaning of the words in electrical dictionary. Could you look the meaning up in the dictionary? I tried to look up the meaning of the words, but it was not included in the dictionary. I tried to look up the meaning of the word in the dictionary, but it was not included in the dictionary. I looked up the way to pass examination, or tip for entering the university. I looked up the tip for passing the examination. I looked up the tip in order to feel sleepy after eating lunch in the internet. I looked up the tip for avoiding feeling sleepy after eating lunch in the internet. I looked up tip for those who don't want to feel sleepy after eating lunch. I looked up the tip. I looked up the tips for not feeling sleepy after eating lunch. Could you look it up? Could you look it up in the dictionary? I used to look up the meaning of the words in dictionary, but now I look up almost everything in the internet. I look almost everything up in the internet. What are you making out? What are you making out? I'm making out a pamphlet for the campaign. I'm making out a test for the students. Could you make out what the professor was explaining today? No, I could hardly understand it. I could scarcely understand it. I could not make heads or tails of what the professor was explaining. I couldn't make heads or tails of what the professor was explaining on the board, but I just took down what the professor was writing. So I will review the class later. Reviewing is very important to memorize things better, deep. Reviewing is very important to memorize things deep. Reviewing will help us to memorize things deep. Reviewing things will help us to memorize things deep. Not many people will be able to make out the equation. Not many people will be able to make out the equation, the question. Not many people will be able to make out the equation. It usually takes longer for me to make out things. Making out things usually takes longer for me. Making out things usually take longer for me. It usually takes much longer for me to make things out. It usually takes much longer for me to make things out. It usually takes much longer for me to make things out. It usually takes much longer for me to make things out. It usually takes much longer for me to make things out. Making things out takes much longer than average people. Making things out takes much longer for me than others. The kid tried to make up excuses to avoid studying. The kid tried to make up false story to avoid studying. The kid tried to make up a story in order to avoid studying, so as to avoid studying. The suspect tried to make up a false story to avoid the guilty. The criminal tried to make up a story to avoid the guilty. The suspect tried to make up a false story to avoid the guilty. The school has to make up for the cancellation due to the typhoon. The airlines company compensated for the delay by giving the coupon. The airlines compensated for the cancellation due to the typhoon by replacing the cancelled seats with the future tickets. The airlines compensated for the sudden cancellation due to the typhoon. by replacing the cancelled seats with future tickets, future seats. I'd like to make up for the delay. My friend made up for his delay by buying me dinner. Treated me to dinner. My friend compensated for his 1 hour delay by treating me to dinner. I was treated to dinner by my friend. I was compensated for his delay. Ooh. Don't even try to make up excuse. Don't even try to make up an excuse. I can see through you all the time. Don't even make up any excuse. Don't even try to make up any excuse. Don't even try to make up an excuse. We've already seen through you. We know your personality. We've already seen through you. The kid made up a false story in order to avoid studying. The kid made up a false story, false excuse, so as to avoid studying. The kid made up a false story to avoid studying. The kid made up a false story. The kid made up a false story in order to avoid studying. The kid made up a false story so as to avoid studying. The employee made up a false excuse in order to avoid the scold. The employee made up a false story, false excuse to explain for his delay. The employee made up a false story, false excuse in order to explain his delay. The employee made up a false story in order to justify his delay. The employee made up a false excuse in order to justify his delay. The employee made up a false excuse so as to justify his delay. The employee made up an excuse in order to justify his delay. The employee tried to justify his delay by making up a false story. The employee made up a false excuse. The employee made up a false excuse in order to justify his delay. Let's make up. I'd like to make up with her, but she is even thinking to get revenge on me, get even with me. I'd like to make up with her, but she is even thinking of getting revenge on me, getting even with me. But finally, fortunately, weak to make up. Don't get even with them. Don't get even with others. Don't get even with others. Don't get even with others. Don't get revenge on others. You can pick out either prize A or prize B. You can pick anything out from the ladder, from the A ladder. You can pick anything out from the ladder A, floor A. You can pick anything out. You can pick one out from the prize A. You can pick one piece out from the prize A. You can pick one out. You can pick out one from the prize A. You can pick out one from the prize A. You can pick out prize 1. You can pick out one from the prize A. I picked out the cheaper. I picked out the expensive. I picked out the expensive. If I were the Prime Minister, I would pick you out as a minister. I would choose you, elect you as a minister. I was obliged to pick the one out which I didn't want to buy because there were only 2 options in the bakery shop. There were only 2 pieces of bread left in the evening. So I was obliged to pick the one out which I don't like to eat because there were only 2 options left in the bakery shop. I was obliged to pick out one from the 2 because there were only 2 pieces of bread left in the bakery shop. I picked out middle size of the jacket. I picked out the middle size of the jacket. The shop clerk said that I would fit into the small size too, but it was too small for me. I felt that actually. So I picked out the middle size of the jacket. Could you pick me up at the airport? Could you pick me up at the airport? Okay, I will pick you up on the way tomorrow. I'm going to pick my friends up at his house because his house is located on the way. I'm going to pick my friends up on the way. I'm going to pick the orders up at the post office. I'm going to pick up the post at the post office. My parents sometimes pick me up on the way home when I was going home from school, from elementary school. My parents sometimes pick me up on the way home while I was walking from elementary school to home. My teacher pointed out my rough sound of the playing. My teacher pointed out some points in the essay. My boss pointed out some errors in my documents, in my reports. My boss pointed out some errors in my proposal. My boss pointed some errors out. My boss pointed my reports out to some errors in it. Which are you pointing at? She is pointing at the north. She is pointing at north. It's rude to pointing at someone. It's rude. It might be considered rude to point to someone. It might be considered rude to point at someone. My essay was pointed out because there were many errors. Some flaws in the car were pointed out. Some flaws in the car were pointed out. My teacher pointed out some errors in my report. My professor pointed out some errors in my report. My teacher pointed out some mistakes in the report, in the calculation. The accountant pointed out some errors in the calculation. The accountant pointed out some mistakes in the calculation. No one pointed out his performance. His performance left nothing to be desired. No one pointed out his performance. His performance left nothing to be desired. Perfect. The kids were ordered to put away the toys. I usually put away everything soon after the usage. Some people cannot put away things. Some people cannot put away things. Some university students are very bad at putting away, ending up a room filled with garbage. Are you good at putting away? Are you good at putting things away? Are you good at putting away things? Are you good at putting things away? Are you good at putting things away? Are you good at putting things away? Are you good at putting away things? I usually put things away soon after the usage. The kids were told to put away the toys. The kids were ordered to put the toys away. The kids were ordered to put away the toys. The kids were told to put the toys away. The forces were called in to put down the riot. Some pedestrians kept putting down the suspect until the police officers arrived. Some pedestrians put down the suspect on the road until the police officers arrived. Some pedestrians were brave enough to put down the suspect on the road until the police officers arrived. The forces were called in to put down the riot. What are you putting down? Why you this kind of person who put down everything that the professor wrote on the board? Why you this kind of person who put down everything that the professor explained on the board? It was so hard to put down everything that the professor explained on the board because it is so fast. What are you putting down? I put down the address of yours. I put down the name of the person because I easily forget anything. I easy to forget anything. I put down his name. I put down my friend's 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 name so that I won't forget it. I put my friend's name down in kanji so that I won't forget it. Forces was called in to put down the riot. I threw away many temptations such as TV and so on to put down my distractions. I removed temptation from my room to put down my distractions. To put distractions down. To put down my distractions. I removed some temptations such as TV, computer and so on from my room to put down my distractions. I removed some temptation from my room to put down my distractions. The forces were called in to put down the riot, put the riot down. Some pedestrians were courageous enough to put down the suspect on the road until the police officers arrived. The forces were called in to put down the riot. I removed temptations such as TV to put down my distractions. Okay, I will finish speaking here. Thank you for watching. See you next time. See you.